The sun hung low over the desert, painting the sky in shades of orange and blood red. Dust swirled around the caravan as it creaked along the uneven path. At the center of the caravan, bound in chains and cloaked in torn fabric, walked a young woman. Her eyes were wide, scanning every movement, every shadow, every whisper in the wind. She was called "Spoils of War" by those who had captured her, and every step she took reminded her of that bitter label. Her name was Elara, though almost no one dared to call her by it. She had been taken from her village, ripped away from everything she knew, and forced into a life she had never imagined. The war had been swift and brutal, and she was merely one of the many prizes claimed by the victors. But there was something in her gaze that refused to break. Though her hands were bound, her spirit was not. The caravan stopped as the sun dipped further. The soldiers set up camp, and the captives were left to sit near the edge of the firelight. Elara's heart raced, knowing she was not just a prisoner but an object of someone's possession, a prize to be given away. She had heard whispers. She was to be delivered to a man, a stranger who had won her in the war. The thought made her stomach twist, fear gnawing at her. Yet beneath that fear, a spark of curiosity flickered. Who was this man? Would he treat her with cruelty, like the others, or something else? Night fell, and the camp quieted. The soldiers' laughter faded, leaving only the soft crackle of fire. Elara stared at the stars above, remembering her village, her family, and the life she had lost. She drew in a shaky breath. "I will survive this," she whispered to herself, though her voice barely rose above the night wind. At dawn, the caravan moved again. The landscape shifted from barren desert to rocky hills, each step heavier than the last. Finally, they reached a fortress-like. The gates opened slowly, and the soldiers marched her inside. Every sound echoed off the stone walls, each step magnifying the fear and tension in her chest. She was led into a grand hall, filled with opulent furniture and bright tapestries. At the far end, a man sat upon a simple chair, not a king or general, but a quiet, imposing figure. His dark eyes studied her as she was brought forward, chained hands awkwardly held before her. His gaze was steady, neither cruel nor welcoming, just calm, like a storm waiting to break. "You are Elara," he said, his voice soft but carrying authority. She nodded, unable to speak, her throat dry and tight. "You have been brought here as a gift," he continued, and the words made her pulse quicken. "But know this, no one can take your will from you unless you let them." She blinked, confused by the strange mix of acknowledgement and authority in his voice. Most men who had taken captives before had shown nothing but dominance. Yet this man, this unknown figure, spoke with a calm certainty that unsettled her. Days passed. Elara was given a room, food, and the freedom to walk the gardens under watchful eyes. At first, she hated it, hated him, hated everything. She refused to speak unless spoken to and kept her distance, careful not to reveal weakness. Yet, as time moved, she noticed the small things, the way he left her food untouched, the way he did not shout, the way he seemed to study her not for control, but for understanding. Then came the first night she saw him alone in the gardens. She had wandered, curiosity stronger than fear, and there he stood under the moonlight, gazing at the stars. For a moment, their eyes met, and the silence between them was heavier than any chain. Words were unnecessary. Something unspoken passed, a question, a warning, a possibility. Elara turned and left without a word, but her heart was no longer just full of fear. A strange feeling had begun to creep in, something that made her both anxious and curious. Could she ever trust this man? Could the one who received her as a gift become someone she might see differently? The first night in her new life ended with more questions than answers, and Elara knew one thing for certain: survival was not just about escaping chains, but about navigating the dangerous, unpredictable human heart. And in this house of stone and silence, every shadow, every glance, every word could change everything. The story of Elara's captivity had only begun, and the game of hearts and wills was about to start, the morning sun streamed through the tall windows of the estate, catching the dust in golden streaks. Elara sat on the edge of her bed, chains removed but the memory of them still heavy in her mind. The first night had been restless, her dreams haunted by the desert, the war, and the unknown man who now ruled her fate. She had thought fear was all she would feel here, but curiosity, strange and unsettling, had begun to take root. Footsteps echoed outside her door. She stiffened. The man, the one who now owned her fate, entered without knocking. His presence was calm, deliberate, like a predator circling its prey, but there was no anger in his eyes. Only observation. "Today, you will see why you were brought here," he said softly. His voice carried no threat, only a quiet authority. Elara didn't answer. She had learned long ago that words could betray weakness. He gestured to the garden. "Walk with me." She followed, the chains of fear still tightening around her heart. The garden was vast, filled with flowers and towering trees that swayed gently in the wind. It seemed peaceful, almost dreamlike, but Elara knew better than to trust appearances. "Why am I here?" she asked at last, her voice barely above. "You were taken from a war you did not start," he replied. "Yet here, you have a choice. Every action, every word, will matter. You will not remain a prisoner forever if you can survive what comes next." Elara frowned. "Survive?" "Yes," he said, stopping to look at her. His dark eyes seemed to pierce through her very soul. "Here, survival is more than avoiding harm. It is about understanding people, understanding yourself, and knowing when to fight and when to surrender." For a moment, she didn't understand. But then a small incident caught her attention. A servant had dropped a tray, spilling food near the man. He didn't shout. He didn't punish. He simply knelt, helped gather the food, and smiled briefly at the servant. There was power in him, but it was controlled, quiet, different from the brute force she had seen in the soldiers who captured her. Days passed. Elara was given small tasks around the estate, sweeping floors, tending the gardens, fetching water. Each task seemed simple, but the man watched her every move. Sometimes he would correct her, not with anger, but with quiet precision, teaching her without breaking her spirit. One evening, he called her to the library, a room filled with towering shelves of books. He handed her a small, delicate object, a locket, and instructed her to open it. Inside was a tiny painting of a young girl smiling, holding a flower. Elara's fingers trembled. "Who is she?" she asked. "My sister," he said. "I lost her many years ago. This locket is the only memory I have. You will keep it safe, and in return, I will tell you stories of trust and loyalty. It is a test. Can you care for something precious that is not yours?" Elara clutched the locket to her chest. She realized this was not just about survival in the physical sense. Days turned into weeks. The man never forced her, never yelled, never demanded blind obedience. Instead, he created challenges, small tests, and moments where her choices mattered. Each time, Elara learned a little more about him, about herself, and about the strange bond forming between them. One night, under the silver light of the moon, Elara found herself standing near the balcony, staring at the stars. The man joined her silently, his presence calm and steady. "You are changing," he said softly. "I am only surviving," she replied, though she knew her words were half-truth. Something within her was shifting. Fear was no longer the only emotion guiding her. Curiosity, respect, even something that felt dangerously close to admiration, had begun to take root. "You are stronger than you know," he said. "And one day, that strength will be tested in ways you cannot imagine." Elara's heart raced. What did he mean? And yet, there was no anger in his voice, only certainty. That night, as she lay in bed, she clutched the locket close to her heart. Survival was no longer just about avoiding chains or cruelty. It was about understanding this strange, powerful man, navigating the silent tests he set, and discovering whether she could trust, even when the world had only taught her betrayal. The first test was over, but the real trials, the ones that would challenge her heart and her mind, were only beginning. And deep down, Elara knew that she would have to face them all if she wanted more than mere survival. She wanted understanding. She wanted control of her fate. And, somehow, she wanted the man who had been both her captor and the source of a strange, unsettling hope. The morning sun had barely touched the estate when Elara awoke to the sound of footsteps echoing in the stone hallways. She had grown used to the quiet rhythm of this place, the subtle ways the man tested her, and the strange tension that hung between them. Yet today felt different. There was a heaviness in the air, a sense that something unseen was about to unfold. She dressed quickly and went to the garden, where the man was already waiting. His expression was unreadable, but his eyes seemed sharper, darker, like they were searching for something hidden deep inside her. "Today, you will face a new challenge," he said, his voice calm but firm. "One that cannot be solved with strength alone." Elara's heart thumped in her chest. She had learned to expect tests, but the hint of danger made her uneasy. "What kind of challenge?" she asked, keeping her tone steady. "You will soon see," he replied, gesturing toward a narrow path that led into the estate's forested grounds. "Follow me. But remember, not everything is as it appears." She obeyed silently, the crunch of gravel underfoot the only sound between them. The forest was dense, with shadows stretching long and dark in the early morning light. Birds chirped, unaware of the tension that hung over the two figures moving carefully among the trees. Finally, they reached a clearing. In the center stood a figure, cloaked and hooded, motionless. Elara could not tell if it was a man or a woman. Her breath caught in her throat. "This is your test," the man said. "You must approach them. Speak. Discover what they want. And decide if they are friend or foe." Elara's eyes narrowed. She had learned to read people, but this was different. This figure was silent, unmoving, like a shadow. She stepped forward cautiously. "Who are you?" she called, her voice echoing slightly in the clearing. The figure did not respond. Slowly, it lifted a hand, pointing to the ground. Confused, Elara glanced down and saw a small box, intricately carved, resting on the grass. Her heart raced. She picked it up carefully, aware of the silence around her. Inside the box was a single, folded letter. She unfolded it, revealing neat handwriting that sent chills down her spine. The letter spoke of betrayal, hidden enemies, and a secret plan that threatened the very estate she now called home. Her eyes widened. Whoever had written this knew her, the man, and the estate intimately. "You see," he said, stepping closer. "Trust is fragile. Not everyone you meet is who they seem. And the shadows of the past can reach into the present at any moment." Elara felt a shiver. She realized that her world had grown far more dangerous than mere captivity. Secrets, hidden motives, and unseen enemies lurked around every corner. And yet, she also realized something else. The man who had brought her here was not simply a captor. He was a protector, a guide, someone who understood the dangers better than anyone. Days turned into nights as the letter's warning became reality. Subtle attempts to undermine her, whispers in the halls, and mysterious messages left in her room tested her constantly. She had to rely on her instincts, her wits, and the fragile trust she was building with the man. One evening, as the moon rose high, she found herself in the library again, studying the letter and the small clues hidden within. The man entered silently, leaning against the doorway. "You are learning quickly," he said, a hint of admiration in his voice. "But knowledge alone will not save you. You must learn to anticipate the moves of those who wish to deceive you." Elara looked up, meeting his eyes. For the first time, she saw something more than calm authority, something softer, almost human beneath the surface. She felt a strange pull, an attraction she did not yet understand. And yet, she knew the stakes were too high to be distracted by feelings. Not yet. Suddenly, a shadow passed across the window, and both of them froze. Danger was... Elara clutched the letter tightly, the words inside now a map of survival, strategy, and caution. The night stretched on, filled with whispers of secrets and the faint rustle of movement beyond the walls. Elara realized she was no longer the same frightened girl who had been brought here weeks ago. Each challenge, each test, had hardened her, sharpened her mind, and forced her to see the world differently. And yet, in the quiet moments, when the danger faded and only the man's presence remained, she felt something new, a fragile hope that perhaps, in this place of chains and shadows, she could find not just survival, but understanding, and maybe even something more. The shadow of secrets had descended upon the estate, but Elara was ready. She had learned to face fear, to navigate deception, and to trust, carefully, those who deserved it. And she knew that whatever came next, she would not face it alone. The estate had grown quieter in the days following the shadow's warning, but Elara sensed that the calm was only temporary. The letter she had found in the forest had revealed the first hints of betrayal, and every glance, every whispered word, now carried weight. She had learned to watch, to listen, and to anticipate. Fear was no longer her only guide, now it was strategy. The man who had taken her as a captive watched her closely, as if aware that the next test would be unlike any before. Yet he offered no guidance, only silent observation. Elara hated it and yet depended on it. Each day under his gaze made her sharper, more aware of the subtle dangers lurking in the stone halls of the estate. One evening, as twilight bled into night, a soft knock echoed from her chamber door. Elara froze. Visitors were rare, and most arrivals carried messages that were dangerous or deceptive. She approached cautiously and opened the door to find a messenger, a young boy, trembling, holding a note that smelled faintly of smoke and fear. "Elara," he whispered, "they are coming. You must see this now." The letter he handed her was hastily written, smudged with ink and blood. It spoke of a plan to infiltrate the estate, to capture or kill those inside, and it hinted that someone close might betray them. Elara's pulse quickened. Danger had never felt so near, so immediate. She ran to find the man. He was in the great hall, studying maps and plans, his calm demeanor unshaken even as he read the letter. "They know of us," he said quietly. "And they will come soon. But knowing is the first step. Preparation is the second." Elara felt a rush of adrenaline. She had survived the desert, the chains, and the subtle tests of her captor. But now the threat was real and close, and survival meant more than obedience, it meant action, courage, and quick thinking. For the next hours, she worked alongside him, learning the hidden passages, memorizing every shadowed corner of the estate, and planning contingencies. He gave her responsibility, tasks that required precision and judgment. It was the first time she realized she was no longer merely a captive, she was a partner, a crucial piece in the defense of this fortress. Night fell, and with it came the first sign of attack. Shadows moved at the edges of the estate, and the faintest whisper of steel on stone sent shivers down her spine. The man took her hand briefly, his touch steadying. "Remember everything I have shown you," he said. "Trust your instincts. They will not fail you." Elara's heart raced as she moved through the hidden corridors, guiding servants to safety, watching for danger, and silently preparing for confrontation. Then, a sudden noise, a crash from the east wing, made her freeze. Someone had breached the gates. She ran, following the man through a concealed staircase. Together, they emerged into a room. Elara's hand shook, not from fear, but from the realization that she had a choice, to fight, to flee, or to face what had been waiting for her all along. A figure lunged at her, but she dodged, remembering every lesson, every subtle warning he had given her. Her movements were quick, precise, guided by instinct and awareness. And then, she saw him, the man who had been both captor and teacher, standing at the center, calm, commanding, cutting through the intruders with skill and focus. In that moment, Elara understood the truth: survival was not just about fleeing danger, but about embracing it, confronting it and relying on trust, the trust that had begun to grow between them. The battle was over almost as quickly as it had begun. The intruders were repelled, the estate secured, and Elara's hands were trembling with adrenaline and exhaustion. The man approached her, his gaze steady. "You did well," he said softly. "You faced fear, uncertainty, and danger, and you survived. Not as a captive, but as someone who earns their place." Elara's breath caught. The words felt heavier than chains, more binding than fear, because they were true. For the first time, she did not feel like a prisoner. She felt like a person, with power, agency, and a place in this world, even if that place was beside the man who had once been her captor. As the night deepened, the estate settled into a fragile peace. But Elara knew this was only the beginning. The shadows of betrayal were far from gone, and the dangers that lurked beyond the walls were patient, silent, and relentless. Yet she also knew something else, something she had never dared to feel before. In the midst of chains, tests, and danger, a bond was forming. Not just trust, but something more delicate, more dangerous, and more human. And whether she wanted to admit it or not, she was beginning to see the man not just as her captor, but as... The night ended with the estate quiet, the fire crackling in the great hall, and Elara sitting beside him, the weight of survival, loyalty, and an unspoken connection pressing against her chest. The first true test of her courage was over. But the greatest challenge, the one that would test her heart, mind, and soul, was still ahead. The days after the attack were heavy with tension. The estate had been secured, but the shadows of betrayal lingered in every corridor, every whispered conversation, and every glance from the servants. Elara moved through the halls with careful steps, her senses sharper than ever. She had survived desert raids, forest shadows, and intruders in the night, but now, the danger was subtler, quieter, and closer to her heart. The man who had once been her captor continued to watch her, teaching her without words, testing her not just with danger, but with patience and trust. Each day, the line between fear and respect, between suspicion and something deeper, grew thinner. Elara had noticed the way he paused when she spoke, the faint warmth in his eyes, and the moments when he lingered near her, as if afraid to leave her side. One morning, the man called her to the balcony overlooking the gardens. The wind blew gently, carrying the scent of flowers and earth. He handed her a small, folded note, sealed with an unfamiliar insignia. "Read it carefully," he said. "Every word matters." Elara's hands trembled slightly as she opened the note. It was a warning. Someone within the estate, someone trusted, had conspired to betray them. The writer promised that soon, the intruders would return, stronger and more cunning. But the note also contained something else, a hint, a clue that could identify the traitor if she watched closely. Her heart raced. She realized that survival now depended on her judgment and intuition, not just strength or obedience. She had to uncover the traitor and for the first time, she understood the full weight of her role. Days passed as she observed the servants, the staff, and even the man himself. Every movement, every subtle gesture, became a clue. She noticed small things, the way one servant avoided the library, the hesitation in another's step, the fleeting glance exchanged with the estate's guards. Each observation added a piece to the puzzle. At night, she found herself alone with the man in the library. Moonlight spilled through the windows, painting the room in silver. He looked at her with an intensity that made her heart beat faster. "You are thinking too much," he said softly, though there was no reproach in his tone. "Trust your instincts. The truth is often clearer than you imagine." Elara met his gaze, feeling a strange warmth, a pull she could not explain. She had fought fear, survived betrayal, and learned strategy, but this feeling, this connection to him, was a new kind of challenge. She did not understand it, and part of her feared it. That night, she followed a faint noise in the corridors, a soft shuffle, almost like a whisper. Her heart pounded as she crept closer, and then she saw it, a servant trying to open a locked chest in the storage room. Elara stepped forward, her voice steady but sharp. "Stop. Now. The servant froze, eyes wide with guilt. The man appeared behind her silently, his presence calm but commanding. Together, they confronted the betrayer, and Elara realized something profound. She had earned the man's trust, and he now relied on her judgment as much as she relied on his guidance. The immediate danger had passed, but something deeper stirred within Elara. In the quiet moments after the confrontation, she found herself sitting beside the man in the garden. The night was calm, the stars reflecting in his dark eyes. "You have changed," he said, his voice softer than usual. "You are no longer the frightened girl, you are someone who can think, act, and survive, and perhaps, care." Elara's breath caught. She looked down, unsure how to respond. The word care echoed in her mind, dangerous and thrilling at the same time. She realized that fear was no longer the only emotion guiding her. Respect, trust, and something deeper, something she had never dared to feel, had begun to grow. "You are," she began, but the words faltered. How could she explain the strange mix of gratitude, fear, admiration, and something more? He reached out, his hand brushing hers lightly. "It is not weakness to feel," he said. "It is what makes us human. And sometimes, the strongest hearts are the ones that dare to trust, and love." Elara's chest tightened. She did not understand it fully, but she felt it, a bond forming, fragile yet undeniable, in the midst of danger, betrayal, and survival. The night deepened, and with it, the realization that the real battle was not only against the enemies outside but also against the walls around her own heart. Could she trust him completely? Could she open herself to someone who had once been her captor? The answer was not yet clear. But for the first time, Elara felt a flicker of hope, a sense that she could navigate the shadows, the dangers, and perhaps even the feelings stirring between them. The heart's dilemma had begun, and the path ahead was uncertain, perilous, and profoundly human. The estate had grown quiet after the last betrayal, but Elara knew better than to believe in peace. Shadows moved in corners, secrets whispered behind closed doors, and the threat outside the walls was far from gone. She had learned to read danger in small movements, to anticipate the unseen, and to rely on her instincts. But now, another challenge loomed, one that would test not only her courage but her heart. The man called her to the balcony at dawn. The wind carried the scent of the distant desert, and the sky was painted in pale gold. He handed her a small, sealed envelope. His dark eyes studied hers closely, calm but intense. "Inside this envelope is a choice," he said softly. "One that will determine not just your survival, but the future of this estate." Elara's hands trembled slightly as she opened it. Inside was a single message, simple but devastating: the enemies would return tonight, stronger than before. They had spies inside, ready to strike. But the note contained another warning, one she recognized immediately. It was a test of loyalty, courage, and trust. "You must decide who to trust," he said. "Even me. And the wrong choice could cost everything." Her pulse raced. She had faced fear before, but this was different. She could fight, defend, and survive, but betrayal within their walls, by someone she had trusted, was unpredictable. She studied his face, looking for clues, searching for the slightest hint of guidance. But his expression remained unreadable. As night fell, the estate shifted into a tense, silent vigilance. Every corridor, every door, every shadow became a potential threat. Elara moved like a shadow herself, guiding the servants, checking hidden passages, and preparing for the confrontation she knew was coming. She was no longer a captive, she was a protector, a strategist, and now, a crucial part of the man's defense. The attack came suddenly, like a storm breaking over the estate. Figures moved through the darkness, silent but deadly. Steel clashed against steel, and the air filled with the sound of struggle. Elara felt her heart pound, but she focused, remembering every lesson, every subtle cue the man had given her. In the chaos, and yet, there was something more, something unspoken between them, a bond forged in trust, fear, and shared struggle. Then, a figure appeared, cloaked and familiar. Elara's breath caught. The betrayer, the one she had uncovered before, had returned, armed and ready to strike. In that moment, she realized the full test. Survival meant not just fighting the enemy, but confronting the shadows within her own heart. She acted without hesitation. Using the hidden passages she had memorized, she trapped the intruder, neutralizing the threat with precision. The man approached, watching her with a mix of pride and something deeper, something she could not name. "You have proven yourself," he said quietly. "Not just in strength, but in judgment, courage, and trust." Elara felt a strange warmth spread through her chest. The words were more binding than chains, more powerful than fear. She had earned his trust, and in doing so, she had begun to earn her own freedom, not from captivity, but from fear. The battle ended as suddenly as it had begun. The estate was safe, but the night left an echo of tension in the air. Elara and the man stood together in the garden, the stars above reflecting in his dark eyes. "You have changed," he said softly. "You are no longer the girl brought here against her will. You are someone who can face danger, deception, and choice, and survive with courage and wisdom." Elara met his gaze, her chest tight. She felt the pull of something she could not name, a connection that had grown stronger with every test, every moment of fear, and every shared glance. "Do you trust me?" he asked, quietly, almost a whisper. Her heart raced. Trust was dangerous, yet necessary. She had learned to survive on instinct, but survival alone was not enough. Only trust, fragile but undeniable, stretching across the space between them. The night ended with the estate secure, the intruders defeated, and the bond between them stronger than ever. But Elara knew the greatest challenge was yet to come, not the enemies outside, but the emotions within her own heart. She had survived every test, but now she had to confront what she truly felt, and whether the man she once feared could become someone she could love. Dawn broke over the estate, casting pale light across the gardens and stone walls. The night of danger had passed, but Elara knew that survival was no longer her only challenge. The tests, the battles, and the betrayals had changed her. What lay ahead now was something she could not fight with strength or skill alone. It was the battle of the heart. She walked through the quiet halls, the locket she had kept close to her chest for so long resting in her hand. Each step echoed memories of fear, struggle, and the lessons she had learned. She was no longer the girl brought here against her will. She was someone who had faced the desert, the chains, the shadows, and the enemies, and emerged stronger, wiser, and unbroken. The man stood in the garden, his figure framed by the rising sun. When he saw her, he approached silently, his gaze steady and intense. There was no authority now, no test, no hidden challenge. Only him, and the bond they had formed over weeks of trials, fear, and survival. "You have proven everything," he said softly. "Strength, courage, judgment, and trust. But now, you must make a choice. Not about survival. Not about fear. But about your heart." Elara felt her chest tighten. The thought of choice, in this moment, was more terrifying than any battle she had faced. She had spent so long surviving, so long obeying and observing, that the idea of she began, struggling to find words. Her voice faltered. The memories of chains, fear, and betrayal mixed with the strange warmth she now felt toward him. "I don't know." He stepped closer, his hand brushing hers gently. "It is not weakness to feel," he said. "It is human. And the strongest hearts are the ones that dare to trust, and love." The words echoed in her mind. She had trusted him through tests, battles, and secrets. She had learned to rely on his guidance, to see the truth behind his calm authority. And now, she realized that what she felt went beyond respect or gratitude. Something deeper, more profound, had grown, a bond she could no longer deny. Her heart pounded, but she took a steadying breath. "I Trust you, she whispered. Not because I have to, but because I want to. He smiled, a faint, warm curve of his lips that seemed to lift the weight of fear and uncertainty from her shoulders. Then there is nothing more to fear, he said. Together, we can face anything. The moment hung between them, fragile yet unbreakable, filled with unspoken emotion. For the first time, Elara felt free, not from chains, not from captivity, but free in her heart. The fear that had once defined her life had been replaced by trust, courage, and the possibility of love. Days passed, and the estate slowly returned to its quiet rhythm. The shadows of betrayal had been cleared, the intruders repelled, and the dangers outside the walls subdued. But the most important change was not in the estate, it was within Elara. She walked the halls with confidence, her head held high, her spirit unbroken. And she walked beside him now, not as a captive, not as a prize, but as a partner, equal in trust and heart. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in deep oranges and reds, Elara and the man stood together on the balcony, overlooking the gardens. The wind carried the scent of flowers, the warmth of the day lingering in the air. She looked at him, her heart full, and he looked at her, eyes reflecting the same bond that had grown between them through danger, fear, and survival. You are no longer spoils of war, he said softly. You are something far stronger. Something far more human. Elara smiled, the chains of her past finally gone. And you are no longer just the man I feared, she replied. You are the one I trust, the one her voice faltered, and she let it rest there, knowing he understood. He reached out, taking her hand in his, the gesture simple yet full of meaning. Then we face the future together, he said. And in that moment, the story of fear, captivity, and survival became something new. A story of trust, courage, and love. The girl who had been taken as a captive had found her place, not just in the world, but beside the man who had been her captor, her teacher, and now, her heart's companion. The sun set fully, casting the estate in golden light. Chains were gone, shadows defeated, and hearts open. Elara had survived every test, every danger, every secret. And in the end, she had found something no battle could ever take away, love, trust, and freedom. The story had begun with fear, but it ended with hope. And the girl once called spoils of war had finally found her forever.